Now, it's no secret that I like the S9. Lumix's S9, I think it's a great little full-frame camera. Obviously, it has some shortcomings. Some things had to go to make it as small as it is. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things I would love to see in an S9 Mark II, but I don't think Panasonic are ever going to make another S9 model again. We'll get there. I don't know when I became an espresso guy, but ever since we bought an espresso machine, I was like, try it, why not? So here's the first thing I think a lot of people would love to see in an S9 Mark II, including myself, and that is a mechanical shutter.
It's definitely possible to add a mechanical shutter in a hypothetical S9 Mark II, but it would likely mean making the camera a bit bigger. The S9 is so compact because it relies on an electronic shutter. Adding a mechanical shutter mechanism would mean more internal components and a little more space, so the camera would probably end up a bit chunkier, but it could definitely be done.
So it's possible. Obviously, taking out a mechanical shutter leaves a lot of space to then make the camera more compact, and obviously fitting in everything else that has to go into creating a camera like this. Remember, this is a full frame sensor, and that means it's going to take up more space within the camera body. There are cameras smaller than this, but they have smaller sensors. However, I would totally love it if it was possible for a mechanical shutter because of one big problem that was pointed out at the very beginning, and that is when you take a photo, you have these unfortunate banding lines, and that happens because you are using an electronic shutter in low light situations. This typically happens like at night with artificial lights. You'll get these weird banding streaks across your photos, and there is no fix for it. It's because of the electronic shutter. The fix is a mechanical shutter, which is why something like the S5 Mark II, which I'm using right now, with its mechanical shutter is superior when it comes to specifically nighttime photography. In last week's video, I showcased how the S9 was amazing for portraits, and it's true, it is, but I shot all of those during the day. One, because, well, you know, daytime, more light, it's pretty in nature and stuff, but I know that this thing isn't the best choice when it comes to low light scenarios. Now, it's not going to plague every single photo. I've had low light photos from this that look totally fine, but the closer you are to an artificial source of light, you're going to have those issues. Now, the second thing I think would be so interesting to add, and I'm curious if it's possible, so we're gonna ask Mr. GPT in a second if it is an EVF. Looking at similar cameras like Sony's A7C Mark II, it's a full frame camera and it has a little EVF in the corner. If Panasonic could do something similar, one of the biggest things that everyone said, all the YouTubers said when they went to Japan to try out the S9 for the first time, was they all wanted to go like this. And you know what? Using this for that portrait video, I found myself instinctively raising my arm up to my face, but then stopping myself, remembering it's just a screen, buddy. There's nothing else to use. And whilst I'm honestly okay with that, I also do enjoy using the EVF for photography from time to time. I'd say like 80% of the time, I will happily use the screen on my S5 Mark II because I'm putting the camera at a certain angle that would just be awkward for me to like bend over to have my eye on the camera at. It just wouldn't make sense to do it that way. But there are times where I do just want to go like this to snap a quick photo, be it for portrait work or for street photography. And so that's where I thought maybe there's two possibilities here. Either, you know, they have the fixed hot shoe in the corner like the A7C Mark II, or they go the Fujifilm route, where you have an optional accessory, which is an EVF that attaches to the hot shoe, which will be the third thing I would change. I will get there. Spoiler. It being an optional accessory means people who are very budget conscious can skip that accessory and just stick with the screen. And the fact that it doesn't have an EVF is their choice. But for people who do want to do more photography stuff, street photography, and they want to be able to raise the camera to their eye, then they have the option.
One potential issue could be the connection between the EVF and the camera. If the hot shoe connection isn't super secure, you might have issues with data transmission or power. Also, having a detachable EVF means there's always the risk of it getting knocked off or damaged if you're not careful. Plus, it could add a little bit of extra bulk when it's attached, which might affect the camera's compactness. But overall, it's a pretty neat solution if you really want that flexibility.
So I think it's a cool option. There's obviously the added risk that you wouldn't have if it was a fixed EVF, so either way would be cool. There's also the additional thing, like with the mechanical shutter, of it would take up more space and obviously increase the cost to the end user. So bit by bit, we're getting a little bit chunkier and a little bit more expensive. Now the third thing, I already said it, a hot shoe. So I'm not going to talk about it for long. Everybody complained about the cold shoe when this camera came out. I even had a comment last week on my portraits video about how there's no hot shoe, so you can't really do portraits with it because you can't use a flash. If that's what you want to do, I understand. This isn't the camera for you. But for like any other type of portrait work, it can be. A hot shoe obviously opens up more possibilities for creativity. On top of flashes that require a hot shoe connection, XLR 32-bit float audio recorder thingy that Panasonic make, as well as other potential third-party accessories, are then usable with the S9. And not being able to access those tools because of the camera you have can be a bit of a bummer. So with the S9 Mark II, it would be sick to have a hot shoe, which one, isn't expensive, and two, even though it would technically add a bit more bulk, it adds way less bulk than a mechanical shutter would or an EVF would. So at the very least, it would be a very small and theoretically simple fix to do. Now, I asked on last week's video what people would want to see on an S9 Mark II, and one of the answers was very interesting, and I don't think it will ever happen, but I want to mention it real quick before I get to my fourth and final point. That is an updated sensor. Whilst I agree, a new sensor would be great, if this camera could shoot 4K at 120 frames per second with little to no crop, if it had a higher megapixel count, if it had, I don't know, the dynamic range boost option that the S1R Mark II and the S1 II have. But I don't think that's ever gonna happen. If they did that with the S9 Mark II, it would cannibalize any future sales for the S1R Mark II and the S1 Mark II. Now, one thing I thought could theoretically be possible, but I don't know if it would be beneficial, is dual SD card slots. One SD card slot and then one micro SD card slot. One issue, and I get it, I totally get it, is not having a second SD card in the camera so that you can do proxy recording or backups. This means that people who shoot weddings, for example, and it's like critical they have a backup of what they're shooting at all times just in case the card becomes corrupted, the S9 just isn't really for you. And that's a shame because it's small, so it's great for gimbals. And it's also a really easy second camera to carry for wedding photographers if you want to switch between focal lengths really quickly. I mean, if I had two of these on my waist at all times because I'm going to switch focal lengths really quickly, these weigh nothing. They're easy to carry, so that would be great. But not having a backup, potentially a deal breaker.
Yeah, it's definitely possible to have a micro SD card slot alongside a regular SD card slot. Some cameras already do this. One of the pros is definitely the added flexibility you can use. Micro SD cards have come a long way in terms of speed, but they might not always match the performance of the fastest full-size SD cards. For something like proxy or backup recording, it might not be a huge issue, especially if you're just capturing lower resolution proxies. But for something like high bitrate video recording, like 6K open gate or 4K and 60 frames per second in 422 10-bit, the micro SD card would need to be a very high speed one. Otherwise, it could create a bottleneck and potentially cause issues during recording. So while it's definitely possible, it would be important to make sure that the micro SD card is up to the task.
So it's possible, and perhaps that's a route that Lumix can go with a future S9 Mark II. But here's the thing. I don't think there's ever going to be an S9 after this one. And here's why. The S9 was marketed as a content creator's camera. It's the camera you take with you to go vlogging, for travel content, and to create content on a daily or weekly basis consistently for social media platforms, all of them, right? Vertical, horizontal, whatever. It's meant to be a fast rocket ship of a camera that lets you color footage in camera very quickly and transfer it to your phone so you can post that reel, post that TikTok every single day without any problems. And I think they've done that. With this camera, you can do those things no problem. There's no bottleneck, there's no issues, there's nothing holding you back. There's then the additional benefit that this camera is 99% the same as the S5 Mark II, minus the mechanical shutter, a second SD card slot, and like a couple internal things like a full-sized HDMI. It's basically the same camera. So that means it's capable of doing professional photography and professional videography. Yes, there's an asterisk. It can't do literally everything like nighttime photography or, things like that. And technically it is possible to overheat the camera because there's no internal fan, although I live in Southeast Asia and I have been using it on extremely hot and humid days. And whilst the camera got hot, it did not overheat and I never saw the warning logo once. And with that, it kind of raises the point of why make a Mark II? Why make something a little bit better when it's already completing its purpose? It is suited enough for the targeted audience that there's no need to make it any better because then it would cannibalize the other cameras. Lumix have tried to make a camera for every type of person, and they are succeeding with that. You have the professional higher-end cameras like the GH7, S1R Mark II, S1 Mark II, and hopefully the S1H Mark II comes out this year. And then you have the more content creator friendly cameras like the S9. And I'd even argue the S5 Mark II is sort of, I think it's the perfect hybrid between the two. It can go either way and you can use it for both. But that's why I don't think we'll ever see a future S9. And although, sure, quality of life wise, it would have been great if there was a hot shoe. It would have been great if the SD card slot was somewhere else, or if there's at least 2 SD card slots for proxy and backup. The reality is, when it comes to situations where I want those features or I need them, I don't pick up this camera. I pick up my S5 Mark II. And I respect that not everybody has the luxury of being able to afford more than one camera. I actually did save up my own money, I sold gear I wasn't using anymore, and I bought both of these cameras myself. I have never received anything from Lumix that I was allowed to keep. I have received gear from them in the past just to make videos about, and then I had to send it straight back, and those videos you can see at the end of this video. But I bought these cameras with my own money. And I genuinely think they are both worth it. And what I really love about each of them is they both fit different situations. If I want something for on-the-go filmmaking and photography, just a camera I can bring anywhere with me and it's not a big deal. This S9 is perfection for that. It's just made for a different audience and a different creator. And if that isn't you, that's okay. But if you've watched this video, I bet you were hoping that perhaps there will be like a new S9 that has this and that and this and that. But honestly, I'm more excited about the bigger cameras, the S1H Mark II in particular. I have no clue what they're gonna do for the S1H Mark II to make it stand out because the S1R Mark II has 8K and the S1 II has the 4K 120 with phase detect autofocus, which was a problem I had when I tested out the S1R Mark II. If the S1H Mark II can create gold out of thin air, I'd probably buy it, but currently I'm looking at the S1 Mark II. The S9 will always have a place in my camera bag. It will always be taken with me whenever I am traveling because it is made for that. And I don't think it needs to be any better. It's perfect the way it is, and if I need something more than what it offers, I'll use the S5 Mark II or any other camera. Why did I walk away? Click on one of these videos on screen if you want to learn more about whatever those videos are, I don't know, and hit the subscribe button, headbutt the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Get it? Because I said headbutt the like button, so I headbutted you. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have headbutted you. Have a great day. See you in the next one.